At 10:04 hours on the morning of May 11th, 1945, a Mitsubishi, a 6M0 fighter traveling at 280 miles per hour, releases a 250-kilogram bomb. The bomb punches through the wooden flight deck of USS Bunker Hill. It tears through the hangar deck. It exits through the port gallery deck and detonates just above the ocean's surface. The Zero, piloted by Lieutenant Junior Grade Seizo Yasunori, crashes into 34 fully fueled, fully armed aircraft waiting on the flight deck. Gasoline ignites instantly. 30 seconds later, a second Zero strikes. The crew has less than half a minute between catastrophes. This is their story. USS Bunker Hill displaces 36,380 tons at full load. She is 872 feet long with a beam of 147.5 feet. Her flight deck can accommodate over 100 aircraft. On this morning, she carries Vice Admiral Mark Andrew Mitcher, commander of Task Force 58, and his chief of staff, Commodore Arleigh Albert Burke. Bunker Hill is the flagship of the Fast Carrier Task Force. She represents the cutting edge of American naval power in the Pacific. She is also a floating bomb. The Essex-class carriers were designed without regard to the Washington Naval Treaty limitations. Between 1941 and 1945, 24 were laid down. 14 saw combat in World War II. None were sunk by enemy action, though several came close. Bunker Hill and Franklin sustained the worst damage of any carriers to survive the war. Franklin lost 724 men. Bunker Hill would lose 396. The ships were never designed for the threat they now face. By May 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy has ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. The battleship Yamato, the largest ever built, lies at the bottom of the East China Sea. Bunker Hill's aircraft helped sink her on April 7. The Japanese have no carriers left. They have few trained pilots. What they have is desperation and a willingness to die. Operation Kikusui No. 6 begins at 0600 hours on May 11. 6 Zeros from the 306th show a special attack squadron lift off from Kanoya Air Base on Kyushu. Each carries a 250-kilogram bomb. Squadron leader Lieutenant Yasunori has fewer than 200 total flying hours. His wingman, Ensign Kiyoshi Ogawa, graduated from flight school in February. He has fewer than 150 hours. They fly at wave top level heading east. Low clouds cover southern Japan. Rain threatens. They stay beneath the weather. American radar struggles to distinguish individual returns through the clutter. At 0958 hours, Ensign Ogawa radios Kanoya. I have found the enemy vessels. The message travels 350 miles back to base. It is his last transmission. Aboard Bunker Hill, the morning proceeds normally. The carrier operates 76 miles east of Okinawa as part of Task Group 58.3. She has been at sea for 58 consecutive days. Flight operations continue without pause. 8 VOD F-4U Corsairs from Marine Fighting Squadron 5-1 are landing. 2 divisions from Navy Fighter Squadron 84 are inbound. The flight deck holds 34 aircraft spotted for launch. They are fully fueled. They are fully armed with bombs and rockets. The Combat Information Center tracks contacts, but the sudden downpour degrades radar performance. Fighter direction officers vector Corsairs toward suspected threats. 8 pilots from VF-84 encounter 30 kamikazes. They shoot down 11. The Corsairs turn for home. They have expended their ammunition. Yasunori's formation breaks through the clouds at 1000 hours. Before them lie the American carriers, white against blue water. Dark puffs of anti-aircraft fire surround them immediately. 1 Zero falls away burning. Ensign Ogawa closes on his leader. He is trained for this moment. Kamikaze pilots are instructed to aim for the base of the island structure. Maximum damage requires hitting the command center. The men on Bunker Hill's flight deck become aware of the attack when Yasunori opens fire. His Zero's machine guns strafe the deck. Fighter Ace Lieutenant Archie Donahue exits his Corsair. He has seconds. Men manning 20mm Oerlikon cannons open fire. The range closes too quickly. Yasunori's Zero is hit. It catches fire. He releases his bomb. The 250-kilogram weapon strikes near elevator number 3. The flight deck on Essex-class carriers is not armored. The planking is 3 inches of teak laid over structural steel. The bomb penetrates easily. It passes through the hangar deck. It exits the port side at gallery deck level. It detonates in the air just above the water. Yasunori's burning Zero hits the flight deck at 1004 hours. The aircraft careens through the spotted planes. Aviation gasoline ignites. 34 aircraft carry 6,000 gallons of fuel between them. They carry bombs. They carry rockets. The Zero's momentum carries it through multiple aircraft before it goes over the side. The damage is catastrophic but localized to the aft flight deck. The crew has 26 seconds. Ensign Ogawa dives nearly vertical. Anti-aircraft fire fills the sky. 40mm Bofors guns fire 120 rounds per minute. 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns throw proximity-fused shells. Ogawa flies through it. He aims for the island. At 10:05 hours, Ogawa drops his bomb and crashes. The bomb penetrates the flight deck near the island. It passes through to the hangar deck. It detonates in the ready rooms where pilots wait. The explosion kills them instantly. Ogawa's Zero crashes into the flight deck. The impact sends one wing through the flag office. 3 officers and 11 enlisted men from Admiral Mitcher's staff die. The Admiral's cabin is destroyed. All his uniforms, personal papers, and possessions are consumed. The fires merge. Bunker Hill now has 2 separate conflagrations connected by a river of burning gasoline flowing across the flight deck. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Francis Carmichael commands Repair, Party 8. His station is aft near the gassing stations. Hoses are already laid out. His men grab them immediately. They advance toward the fire from forward and aft. The wind is 20 knots. It drives the flames across the deck. Foam proves ineffective. The wind tears it apart. Solid streams are used to wash burning gasoline over the side. Fog nozzles work better. The fog disrupts the fire's oxygen supply. In the hangar deck, the situation deteriorates. The bomb that detonated in the ready rooms has blown through bulkheads. Fire spreads to aircraft in the hangar. More fuel ignites. Ammunition begins cooking off. 5-inch rockets detonate. Bombs explode. The hangar deck becomes a kill zone. Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Robert Frederick Loesch fights to keep power online. The forward engine room is directly below the hangar. Temperature soars. Smoke fills the space. His men work in conditions approaching 160 degrees Fahrenheit. They cannot breathe without rescue breathers. They remain at their stations, on the flight deck. Burning aircraft slide toward the port side. Some go over. Others remain, continuing to burn. Gasoline runs like water. It pools in low spots. It finds its way through ventilation intakes and cable runs into spaces below. Small fires start throughout the ship. At 10:12 hours, the 5-inch gun mount number 5 magazine cooks off. The explosion kills everyone in and around the mount. Shrapnel tears through nearby personnel. The island structure is pockmarked with fragment impacts. At 10:20 hours, another massive explosion occurs in the hangar. A bomb or torpedo warhead has detonated. The blast wave travels through the ship. Men are thrown from their feet. In Damage Control Central, Lieutenant Frederick Hawes maintains communication with repair parties. Reports are contradictory. Some stations don't answer. Others report fires out of control. The picture is incomplete. Captain George Alexander Seitz commands Bunker Hill. He maintains 20 knots. The wind across the deck feeds the fires, but it also clears smoke. He needs visibility. He turns the ship to keep wind away from the island where his command staff fights to maintain control. The evolution is delicate. Too much wind feeds the fires. Too little wind means smoke blinds everyone. In the hangar deck, men are trapped. Fire blocks escape routes forward and aft. Some go over the side. They jump from the hangar deck opening. It is 40 feet to the water. Sharks follow carriers. They feed on garbage thrown overboard. Men jump anyway. At 10:30 hours, USS Wilkes-Barre, a Cleveland-class light cruiser, closes to 300 yards. Her fire hoses reach across the gap. Water arcs onto Bunker Hill's flight deck. The assistance is marginal. The fires are too large, but the gesture matters. Men see help arriving. Destroyers, USS English and USS Charles S. Sperry maneuver close. They prepare to take off personnel if ordered. Admiral Mitcher has not given that order. He will not abandon ship until forced. Lieutenant Joseph Timothy O'Callaghan, the ship's Catholic chaplain, moves through smoke-filled passageways. He administers last rites. He helps carry wounded men. He organizes bucket brigades where hoses cannot reach. He will later receive the Medal of Honor. His citation reads, "With complete disregard for his own safety, he organized and led firefighting crews." This is understated. O'Callaghan enters spaces where others will not go. In the forward engine room, conditions have become impossible. Temperature exceeds 170 degrees. Men collapse. Chief Engineer Loesch orders rotation. Men work 10-minute shifts, then evacuate to breathe. They return. The engines cannot stop. Without power, firefighting pumps fail. Without pumps, the ship dies. At 1100 hours, the forward fire is contained. Repair. 8 has pushed it to the deck edge. They wash burning gasoline overboard. Aircraft that cannot be saved go over the side. Men work in asbestos suits. The suits protect against radiant heat, but not duration. Men can work 15 minutes before heat exhaustion forces relief. The hangar deck fire continues. Access is limited. Smoke is impenetrable. Temperatures approach 1,000 degrees in some compartments. The fog nozzles that work on the flight deck are less effective here. The confined space defeats them. Men try foam again. The high-capacity foam systems installed on Essex-class carriers were designed for precisely this scenario. Foamite generators, powered by pressure accumulators, are positioned every 100 feet. The foam is protein-based. It forms a blanket over burning fuel. In theory. In practice, the fires are too hot. The foam breaks down. New foam is applied. It breaks down. The process repeats. Men die in the attempt. They are overcome by smoke. They are caught by flashovers. They are killed when ammunition explodes. At 1130 hours, Admiral Mitcher receives a casualty report. It is incomplete but devastating. Hundreds dead, hundreds wounded. The flagstaff has been decimated. 14 of his staff officers and men are dead or missing. His chief of staff, Commodore Burke, evacuated trapped personnel from the flag radio room. Burke led the rescue himself. He pulled men through smoke so thick he could not see. Mitcher makes his decision. Bunker Hill is combat ineffective. Task Force 58 cannot be commanded from a ship that cannot launch aircraft. At 1300 hours, he orders transfer of the flag. He and Burke and the surviving staff will transfer to USS English by Breach's Buoy. From English, they will transfer to USS Enterprise. Enterprise will become the new flagship. This is a bitter moment. Mitcher has commanded from carriers throughout the war. Lexington, Hornet. Bunker Hill. Now Bunker Hill is burning, and he must leave her. The visual signal is hoisted. I am shifting my flag. The message is acknowledged across the task force. At 1630 hours, Mitcher and his staff transfer to English. They carry nothing. Everything was destroyed. Uniforms, papers, personal effects. Mitcher's possessions from 3 years of war are ash. On Bunker Hill, the fires continue. At 1300 hours, the flight deck fires are extinguished. At 1500 hours, the hangar deck fires are under control. Smoldering continues. Small fires reignite. Gasoline vapors create explosion hazards. Damage control parties remain at stations. They will for days. At 1800 hours, Captain Seitz tours the damage. The aft flight deck is destroyed. The number 3 elevator is jammed. The island is pockmarked and burned. Below decks, the ready rooms are obliterated. The hangar deck is a twisted ruin. Bulkheads are blown out. Frames are bent. The gallery deck has a hole where Yasunori's bomb exited. The ship is a wreck, but she floats. Her engines run. Her rudder answers. She can steam at 20 knots. This is the victory, against all probability. Bunker Hill survives. The human cost is catastrophic. 346 men are confirmed dead. 43 are missing and will never be found. 264 are wounded. Many burns are severe. The ship's medical staff works without pause. Morphine runs low. Plasma runs low. Men die waiting for treatment. On the morning of May 12, burial preparations begin. The dead must be identified. This process is methodical and horrible. Medical personnel use 4 methods. First, dog tags. Most men wear them. Second, dental records. Teeth survive fire. Third, physical characteristics. Scars, tattoos, distinctive features. Fourth, location. If a man was known to be at a specific station and remains are found there, identification is made by position. Many men cannot be identified. They are burned beyond recognition. They have no dog tags. Their teeth are too damaged. They are listed as unknown. At 1400 hours on May 12, the burials begin. The dead are brought to the fantail. They are wrapped in canvas. They are weighted. A chaplain reads the service. The bodies are committed to the sea. The process takes all afternoon. Row after row of canvas-wrapped bodies slide into the Pacific. 389 men. 43 more are missing, presumably blown overboard or vaporized by explosions. Bunker Hill turns southeast. She makes for Ulithi. The Marine pilots of VMF 221 were airborne during the attack. They were diverted to other carriers. At Ulithi, they rejoin their ship. The reunion is somber. They see the damage. They learn which friends are dead. From Ulithi, Bunker Hill steams to Pearl Harbor. From Pearl Harbor, she proceeds to Bremerton Naval Shipyard in Washington. She arrives on June 9. Repairs begin immediately. They will not be completed before war's end. The damage to Bunker Hill represents a case study in what happens when bombs and kamikazes strike a carrier during flight operations. The Essex class were designed with survivability in mind. They had extensive damage control systems. They had trained repair parties. They had redundant firefighting mains. 14 fire mains depended on ship's power. 2 additional mains were powered by independent gasoline engines. Foam systems were installed throughout. The design philosophy was more of everything. It was almost not enough. The flight deck was unarmored. This was a deliberate choice. British carriers had armored flight decks. The armor was 3 inches of steel. It protected against bombs, but it reduced aircraft capacity. American doctrine emphasized the deck load strike. Launch as many aircraft as possible as quickly as possible. This required maximum deck space and maximum hangar space. Armor was weight. Weight reduced capacity. The decision was made. No armor on the flight deck. The consequence was that both bombs penetrated easily. Had the flight deck been armored, Yasunori's bomb might have detonated on the deck rather than passing through. The aft fire would have been worse. But Ogawa's bomb would not have reached the ready rooms. The ready room massacre would not have occurred. 14 staff officers would not have died. This calculus was understood. The design was intentional. American carriers would absorb more damage than British carriers. But American carriers would launch more aircraft. Over the course of a campaign, more aircraft meant more strikes. More strikes meant more enemy losses. The trade was considered acceptable until it wasn't. The foamite systems failed not through design flaw, but through overwhelm. The foam worked in controlled tests. It worked against single aircraft fires. It did not work against 34 burning aircraft simultaneously. The volume of burning gasoline exceeded the foam's capacity. New foam was developed after the war. Aqueous film-forming foam, IFF. It was not available in 1945. The firefighting doctrine emphasized aggressive direct attack. Men advanced with hoses toward the fire. They used fog nozzles. They used straight streams. They used foam when possible. This worked against fires that could be approached. It failed against fires in confined spaces where approach was impossible. The hangar deck fire could not be fought directly for hours. It had to burn until fuel was exhausted or until access could be forced. The fog nozzles were a recent innovation. They produced a fine spray that was more effective than solid streams against gasoline fires. The spray absorbed heat and displaced oxygen. Solid streams often spread burning fuel. The fog nozzles were developed based on civilian fire department techniques and introduced to the fleet in 1943 and 44. They saved Bunker Hill. Without them, the fires could not have been controlled. The damage control organization was extensive. Every man aboard had a battle station for damage control. Repair parties were stationed throughout the ship. Each party had specific equipment and specific responsibilities. Repair 1 controlled Damage Control Central. Repair 2 through Repair 10 covered different sections. Cross-training was constant. Men knew multiple jobs. When casualties reduced a repair party, men from other stations filled in. This system saved Bunker Hill. When Repair 8 took casualties, men from Repair 5 reinforced. When the hangar deck became untenable, men from other divisions entered. The organization was redundant and flexible. It had to be. The engineering plant performance was extraordinary. Chief Engineer Loesch kept his men at their stations in conditions that should have been impossible. Forward engine room temperature exceeded 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Men rotated in 10-minute shifts. They used rescue breathers. They worked until they collapsed. They recovered and returned. The engines never stopped. Power never failed. Without power, the firefighting pumps would have failed. The ship would have been lost. Loesch received the Navy Cross. His citation reads, "For extraordinary heroism as chief engineer of the USS Bunker Hill in action against enemy Japanese forces off Okinawa on May 11, 1945. This is insufficient. Loesch kept a ship alive that should have died. Captain Seitz's ship handling was critical. Maintaining 20 knots kept wind across the deck. The wind fed the fires, but it cleared smoke. The balance was delicate. Seitz judged it perfectly. He turned the ship to control wind direction. He kept the fires away from critical spaces. He maintained enough speed for steerage while not exceeding the ship's ability to fight fires in high wind. This was seamanship of the highest order. Seitz received the Navy Cross. He remained with his ship. He never considered abandonment. This was not bravado. Essex-class carriers were built to survive. Even catastrophically damaged, they could usually be saved. Seitz knew this. He trusted his crew. He trusted the design. His trust was rewarded. The casualties were the second worst of any carrier to survive the war. Only Franklin lost more. Franklin lost 724 men on March 19, 1945. She was hit by 2 bombs while preparing to launch a strike. The pattern was identical to Bunker Hill. Fueled and armed aircraft on deck. Bombs penetrate to the hangar. Fires and explosions. Franklin nearly sank. Her captain, Leslie Edward Garris, refused to abandon. Cruiser USS Santa Fe came alongside and fought fires. Franklin survived. She made it back to New York under her own power. Her casualties exceeded anything Bunker Hill suffered. But Franklin was hit by bombs, not kamikazes. The kamikaze added a dimension. The aircraft itself became a weapon. Yasunori's Zero destroyed aircraft by impact and fire. Ogawa's Zero penetrated deep into the ship. The combination of bomb and aircraft was more destructive than either alone. This was the kamikaze's effectiveness. A single pilot could inflict damage that would require multiple bomb hits to achieve. The Japanese understood this. By May 1945, they had no other options. Their navy was destroyed. Their air force was depleted. Their pilots were untrained. The only advantage was willingness to die. Conventional attacks failed. Kamikazes succeeded. The Americans had no counter. Shooting down 80% of kamikazes still meant 20% hit. Against massed attacks, some always got through. Operation Kikusui No. 6 launched 150 aircraft. Most were kamikazes. They attacked the fleet off Okinawa. Bunker Hill was the biggest success. Other ships were hit. USS Hugh W. Hadley was struck by a Baka rocket bomb. USS Brown was damaged. USS Harry F. Bauer was damaged. But Bunker Hill was the flagship. Bunker Hill carried the task force commander. Her loss as flagship disrupted command and control. This was not coincidence. The kamikazes targeted carriers. They targeted large carriers preferentially. Bunker Hill was the biggest target in Task Group 58.3. Yasunori and Ogawa selected her deliberately. They succeeded beyond all expectation. Ensign Ogawa was 22 years old. He was a Waseda University graduate. He was drafted in summer 1944. He graduated flight school in February 1945. He had minimal training. He had no combat experience. His last letter home expressed acceptance of death and hope that his sacrifice would matter. His body was recovered from the wreckage. Navy diver. Robert Frederick Schock entered the hangar deck the day after the attack. He found Ogawa's Zero partially submerged. He found Ogawa dead in the cockpit. Schock removed Ogawa's name tag, his watch, photographs, a letter, and his parachute harness buckle. He kept these items. He brought them home after the war. Schock died in 2001. His son found the items. They were returned to Ogawa's family in 2001. A ceremony in San Francisco reunited the artifacts with Ogawa's niece and grandniece. The watch was smashed. The name tag was blood-soaked. The letter was water-damaged. They were returned nonetheless. Lieutenant Yasunori was 21 years old. His body was not recovered. He went over the side with his aircraft. His background is less documented. He was squadron leader. He had more experience than Ogawa, but still minimal by American standards. He led his men to their deaths. He died with them. This was leadership in the Imperial Japanese Navy in May 1945. The remaining 4 aircraft from their formation are unaccounted for. One was shot down approaching Bunker Hill. The other 3 disappeared. They likely crashed into the ocean after running out of fuel, or they were shot down by combat air patrol, or they struck other ships and were not individually recorded. The accounting is incomplete. Bunker Hill was out of the war. She completed repairs in August 1945 but did not return to combat. The war ended. She participated in Operation Magic Carpet, transporting veterans home from the Pacific. She made multiple trips to Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Guam, and Saipan. She was open for visitors on Navy Day, October 27, 1945 in Seattle. In January 1946, she was ordered to Bremerton for deactivation. She was decommissioned on January 9, 1947. She entered the reserve fleet. She was reclassified CVA-17 in October 1951. Attack carrier. She was reclassified CVS-17 in August 1953. Anti-submarine carrier. She was reclassified AVT-9 in May 1959. Auxiliary aircraft transport. She never returned to service. Bunker Hill and Franklin were the only Essex-class carriers never recommissioned after World War II. Their damage was too severe. Their repair costs were too high. Newer carriers were available. The decision was made to scrap them. Bunker Hill was sold for scrap in 1973. Parts of her survive. 600 tons of steel armor plate were purchased by Fermilab. The steel was manufactured before the atomic age. It contains no radioactive contamination. It is used as shielding for particle physics experiments. Dome-shaped protective shrouds from her mothballing were incorporated into a residence in West Lynn, Oregon. The ship's bell was purchased from the scrapper. It was displayed at the San Diego Air and Space Museum. In 1986, it was provided to the guided missile cruiser USS Bunker Hill, CG-52. The lessons of May 11th were studied extensively. War damage reports were compiled. Recommendations were made. Some were implemented. Some were not. The flight deck armor question was revisited. The Midway-class carriers under construction received armored flight decks, 3.5 inches of special treatment steel. The armor increased weight. It reduced aircraft capacity. It was judged necessary. The kamikaze threat demanded it. Firefighting systems were improved. More foam generators. Better foam. Higher capacity pumps. More independent power sources. The hangar deck sprinkler systems were upgraded. Automatic activation systems were installed. These changes appeared in post-war carriers. Damage control training was intensified. Every sailor received more extensive firefighting training. Specialized schools were established. The lessons from Bunker Hill and Franklin were incorporated. The training emphasized aggressive action and redundancy. The vulnerability during flight operations was recognized but not solved. Carriers remain most vulnerable when aircraft are spotted on deck, fueled and armed. This is inherent to carrier operations. The deck load strike requires it. The solution is not to avoid the vulnerability, but to minimize exposure. Launch faster. Recover faster. Clear the deck faster. This became doctrine. The kamikaze problem had no clean solution. More fighters on combat air patrol helped. Better radar helped. More anti-aircraft guns helped. None of it was sufficient. The suicide attacker willing to die is nearly impossible to stop completely. The Americans learned to accept losses and continue operations. This was the only answer. At Okinawa, 15 radar picket destroyers were sunk. 45 were damaged. Out of 206 picket ships total, they absorbed the kamikazes that would otherwise hit carriers. This was deliberate. The picket ships were sacrificed to protect high-value targets. The tactic worked, but the cost was appalling. The plan for invading Japan included massive kamikaze attacks. Thousands of aircraft were hidden on Kyushu and Honshu. They would launch when the invasion fleet approached. American planners expected casualties to exceed anything previously experienced. The atomic bombs made invasion unnecessary. The kamikazes remained on the ground. Their pilots waited for orders that never came. Today, the attack on Bunker Hill is studied at the Naval War College. It is taught at damage control schools. It appears in carrier qualification training. The photographs are shown to every naval aviator and every surface warfare officer. The image of the flight deck, looking aft, with firefighters silhouetted against flames. The image of the ship burning, photographed from USS Bataan. The image of the wreckage after the fires were out. These are required viewing. The lessons are simple and hard. Carriers are vulnerable. Damage control saves ships. Training matters. Leadership matters. Courage matters. Men will do extraordinary things if led properly and trained properly and equipped properly. Bunker Hill proved this. 396 men died, but 2,200 lived. The ship survived. Against 2 kamikazes in 30 seconds, against fires that consumed 70% of the flight deck, against explosions and chaos and terror, the crew saved their ship. This was not luck. This was design and training and will. The Essex class were built to survive. The crews were trained to fight. When the moment came, they did both. Bunker Hill lived because her crew refused to let her die. That is the lesson. That is what the photographs show. That is what must be remembered. The dead are remembered. The memorial at Bunker Hill's gravesite in Arlington National Cemetery lists the names. 346 confirmed dead, 43 missing. Some have individual graves. Most were buried at sea off Okinawa. They rest in the Pacific. They are not forgotten. Vice Admiral Mitcher continued to command Task Force 58 from Enterprise. Enterprise was hit by a kamikaze on May 14. 3 days after Bunker Hill, 14 men died. Mitcher shifted his flag again to USS Randolph. He commanded from Randolph until relieved on May 2080. He returned to the United States. The war ended while he was stateside. He never returned to combat. He died February 3, 1947. He was 60 years old. Exhaustion and stress had broken his health. Commodore Burke continued as Chief of Staff through the flag transfers. He received the Silver Star for his actions on Bunker Hill. He received a letter of commendation. His citation notes, he evacuated trapped personnel with utter disregard for personal safety. Burke would later become Chief of Naval Operations. He served from 1955 to 1961, the longest-serving CNO in history. He died January 1, 1996. He was 94. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are named for him. Captain Seitz continued to command Bunker Hill through repairs and decommissioning. He retired as a Rear Admiral. He died in 1969. Chief Engineer Loesch received the Navy Cross. He continued in the Navy after the war. He retired as a captain. Lieutenant O'Callaghan received the Medal of Honor. He was the first chaplain in the Navy to receive the medal. His citation describes organizing firefighting crews and administering to the wounded under fire. O'Callaghan left the Navy after the war. He returned to teaching. He died March 18, 1964. He was 57. The crew dispersed. They went home. They returned to families. Most did not speak of what happened. This was common among combat veterans. The memories were too hard. The losses too great. Years later, some opened up. They attended reunions. They shared stories. They ensured the history was recorded. Bruce Wayne Myers was a gunner's mate 3rd class. He helped recover bodies the day after the attack. He tried to forget. Decades later, he saw a photograph in a book about Bunker Hill. The photograph showed dead shipmates in the exact spot where he had recovered them. He walked out of his office and cried for an hour. The memories never left. Art Volkema was a talker on the flight deck. He wore a sound-powered phone helmet. In the iconic photograph taken by Tony Falcone, Volkema is visible holding his helmet over his ears. He had been transferred from Air Aft Station the day before the attack. Every man at his old position was killed. He survived by accident of reassignment. Robert Schock kept Ogawa's belongings for 56 years. He never spoke of them. His son found them after Schock's death. The return to Ogawa's family brought closure to both families. American and Japanese, the war divided them. The artifacts reunited them. This is what remains. Photographs, documents, memories, artifacts, and the knowledge that when tested, men rose to meet the moment. They fought fires they could not control. They saved shipmates they could not see. They kept engines running in temperatures that should have killed them. They did these things because they were trained and led, and because the alternative was unthinkable. Bunker Hill was a ship, 872 feet of steel and wood and machinery. But ships are more than metal. Ships are the men who serve aboard them. Bunker Hill lived because her crew made her live. 396 paid with their lives. The rest carried those deaths forward. They remembered. They honored. They ensured the story was told. On May 11, 1945, at 10:04 hours, the first zero struck. 30 seconds later, the second hit. In the space between those impacts, in the hours and days that followed, ordinary men did extraordinary things. They saved their ship. They saved each other. They proved that courage and training and will can overcome nearly anything. Nearly, the dead remain dead. The missing remain missing. The sea keeps its own, but the ship lived. The story lives. The lesson endures. This is the legacy of USS Bunker Hill. This is what must be remembered. Not just the fire, not just the casualties, but the response, the fight, the refusal to quit. That is the story. That is the history. That is what the floating inferno teaches us still.